I will also give you all the option, whatever you want, to decide whether or not you want to leave your cameras on or not. We're going to be running through a PowerPoint presentation shortly. I also just want to, before we get into the introductions of the community development staff, ask folks or let folks know that the community development staff is on and they'll be monitoring the chat. So we're going to ask folks to punch in any questions you might have during the presentations into the chat, and we'll go through them at the end in the order that we kind of receive them. So please feel free to drop any questions that you have there. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat and kind of running through the questions as they come up towards the end. And so now I just want to introduce myself and then give the community development folks an opportunity to introduce themselves before we jump into the details of the presentation tonight. So my name is Giovanni Baez-Rose. I'm Assistant City Manager and Director of the Planning Department. Many of you who have worked with our community development staff in the past know that our former director left, and so that position has remained open. And so right now I've been working one-on-one with the team. And so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves individually. Sue, if you can go first.
Sure. I'm Sue Murphy. I know a lot of you, but a lot of you are new faces to me. My title is Senior Program Manager here, and I help handle all the grant agreements. Once you receive an award, I handle all those grant agreements, moving forward, all the billings and things like that, and help with technical assistance and things.
Betty.
Hi, I'm Betty Ronfliorazzo. I assist Sue in here. I'm the Community Development Assistant. I also offer a lot of tech assistance to many of you, and we're looking forward to assisting some of the new faces here.
Great. And Sandra?
Hi, I'm one of the new faces here, I suppose. My name is Sandra, and I'm an associate planner and the community development team, and I help out basically the team with some of the CDBG and ESG and a lot of the reporting too, trying to do that also as well. Nice to see you all.
So first, I want to thank everybody for taking the time out to join us this evening. We're going to do an overview of what these two programs, CDBG and ESG, are, and then jump into details about some changes that you're going to see. So in just a second, I'm going to share my screen so we can just jump right into the presentation. Are you all seeing my screen? Somebody from my team say yes. You can.
Yes,
okay, great.
It's kind of tall and skinny though. It's not like the whole screen. Okay.
Does that work now?
That's smaller.
Okay, hold on. Oh, I think I need to move it to the other screen. Hold on. Stop share. This is what happens with dual monitors. All right, let me do it this way. Share screen. Is that any better?
No. Well, oh, there you go. That's better.
It's good? Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, everybody. So first, we're going to cover community development block grant or CDBG, and then ESG will be the sort of second half, and then we'll kind of talk at the end about the changes that you'll see that will be kind of impacting both funding sources. So again, just to remind folks, if anybody missed it in the beginning, the staff from community development will be keeping an eye on the chat function. So if you could please drop any questions you have as they come up, and then we'll kind of wait until the end and go through them in the order that they popped into the chat. So basically, this is just an overview of kind of what we'll be talking about tonight. For some of you, this might be, a lot of information that is very familiar to you if you've previously gotten these funds, but we knew that we were going to have some new faces tonight, so we wanted to do a general overview. about what these programs are, some of the basics about them, and then summarize some of the changes that you'll be seeing in the application process and funding this year. So what is Community Development Block Grant? It's something that Lowell received its first entitlement from HUD in 1974. We're what's considered an entitlement community based on definitions that come through the federal government, essentially focused on urban areas that are, low mod income. It's based on demographics. The city does not need to apply to the federal government for these funds. Because we are an entitlement community, we sort of automatically get them. The goals of CDBG as a program are determined at the federal level. So a lot of what our local programming is implementing these sort of goals and priorities that have been previously identified at the HUD federal level. So it's a program that helps address a wide range of needs. It's about creating safe, decent, sanitary housing, providing suitable living environments, expanding economic opportunities. And one thing for you all who are new to the program to keep in mind is that HUD is really focused on making improvements in the lives of low and moderate income individuals. So 70% of the sort of beneficiaries of the program, folks that you're going to be working with, need to fall into that category of low mod income. That is something that you as an organization should be thinking about when you're applying to CDBG funds, and thinking about the kind of program that you want to apply for. You need to be certain that at the end of the day, at least 70% of the population that you are serving is going to fall into this category of low mod income. And again, low mod income is as defined at the federal level. These are not definitions that are created or implemented by the city of Lowell. So the national objectives of CDBG is that it, again, needs to benefit low and moderate income people, prevents or eliminates slum and blight, or meets an urgent need that's sort of immediate, and that there aren't traditional other sources that could be able to address that. I want to give you some examples. I think, having concrete examples of the kinds of things that we can and cannot fund are most helpful to people. So you may see your organization's name, or you might not see your organization's name, and that has absolutely nothing to do with, what we think of your organization. We just thought for folks, it might be easier to tie in some of these kind of subject matters into thinking about local organizations. So under the public service pot of funds through CDBG, you can use funds for food assistance programs to assist disabled persons, for recreational activities, youth services, immigrant and senior services, and job training programs. And below each of these headers, you can see the individual examples of individual organizations locally that have fit into these categories in the past. Under non-public service, public facility improvements, public park improvements, micro enterprise, economic development, sanitary code, and emergency housing repair. Many of those, some are organizations outside of the city. Many of those pots of funds actually fund a lot of the city of Lowell programming. There are things that are considered ineligible for CDBG funds. Again, I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record. These are things that HUD and the feds have determined are ineligible for these funds. These are not things that the city of Lowell has implemented, but we cannot use CDBG funds for buildings for general conduct. Like we can't build us, in community development, our own office building with these funds. We cannot use these funds to carry out regular kind of responsibilities of the government, meaning, we can't pay for services that the city of Lowell would and should be doing regardless of whether we had CDBG funds. So just the business of operating a city, we cannot cover those costs. Political fundraising, obviously, political activities of any kind, really. And then fundraising, we can't use these funds to fund programming to raise other funds, essentially. And again, these are just some examples of things that would be considered ineligible. So speaking of, who is eligible to get CDBG funds? I know many of the folks that are on this meeting right now would fall into this first category of a nonprofit 501c3 organization, a public institution of higher ed. Some private entities may be able to access funds for specific economic development activities. And then, as I said before, the City of Lowell, city departments, the planning department specifically does apply for the use of these funds to fund various projects. Only programs that serve low and mod income individuals. So again, that definition of low mod income is no more than 80% of AMI. That's a federal standard, and that's what we would be holding folks for. There are some groups that you don't really need to, you automatically sort of qualify under the assumption that there are special groups that would qualify under low and mod income. You can see some of those: abused children, victims of domestic violence, the elderly, disabled, homeless, people with HIV/AIDS, illiterate adults, migrant farm workers. So those folks have sort of special status in that they are assumed to be eligible. One thing that I do want to say that we don't have listed here, if you are an organization that does not yet have 501c3 status, but you are working with an organization that is acting as your fiscal agent. I know some of the younger nonprofits kind of start out working with organizations that are 501c3 as their fiscal agent. If that is the case, you must apply. You have to make that clear to us in your application that you're applying for your organization and that X organization is acting as your fiscal agent. So when the City of Lowell is going to be executing agreements, those agreements are going to be with the organization that's the 501c3. So it's really important for us to know that when you're applying, that you're applying on behalf of your organization, that you do not have 501c3 status, and this is the organization that does have that status, and that they're acting as your fiscal agent. And we will, of course, require proof that that relationship exists, and that will have to be included in your application. So I just want to make sure people understand that eligible organizations that are 501c3 can apply. If you are not 501c3, there is still an avenue for you to apply, but you need to make sure that you have that existing relationship with a 501c3 established organization. Now, I want to provide folks a little bit of a breakdown on the kinds of funds we're talking about here. So, as I said before, Lowell as an entitlement community automatically gets a distribution of funds through HUD. I mean, not automatically, we have to do lots of reporting and make sure we're in compliance with HUD, but assuming that we're doing all of that correctly, we get an allotment from HUD. Now, they have very specific buckets under which we can spend these funds. So we don't know what our 23-24 funds are going to be like. So we wanted to just give you an example using last year's funds, so you can get a sense of the amount of money that we're kind of talking about here. So in 22-23, we received a little over $2 million in CDBG funding. HUD designates that a maximum of 15% of that whole amount can be used for the bucket under public service. So in real dollars, what that actually represents was for 22-23, we had around $320,000 that we could use for that particular bucket. In addition to that, HUD does allow communities to take 20% for administrative expenses. Now, Lowell takes the maximum of 20% for administrative expenses, and that essentially pays for our staff time, the community development staff's time, to do the work of administering these grants and funds. So that leaves a balance of a little over $1 million, $1.3 million for the non-public service eligible activities. So just to give you a sense of kind of how those funds break down, we assume in 23-24, because again, we don't know what the final allotment is going to be, that it'll be pretty similar. We say, you know, we base it on the year before, give or take about 5%. That has been pretty consistent, and a safe assumption on our part for the last several years. So we're also assuming that we'll get roughly the, 2.1, give or take 5%, in the 23-24 allotment from HUD. So now we're going to jump into ESG, emergency solutions grants. What is ESG? You may have heard it referred to as McKinney funds or ESG in the past. It sort of depends, but essentially it is for to support folks that are dealing with homelessness. Lowell, this is I guess a newer fund for the city compared to CDBG that we've been getting since the 70s. We received our first ESG entitlement in 1990. The goals of the program are essentially to assist sheltered and unsheltered homeless persons, people that are at risk of homelessness, and to essentially help people gain stability in their housing. Things that are eligible for ESG. ESG is very limited. These are the only kinds of things essentially that you can use ESG funds for. For street outreach workers and street outreach work, emergency shelter, to obviously provide people emergency shelter, homelessness prevention, so stop homelessness before it happens, try to get in front of that, rapid rehousing to get people back into a situation of permanent stable housing, and to fund HMIS operating systems to help you with reporting. You must be assisting sheltered or unsheltered homeless persons or people who are at risk of homelessness. And again, because this is the feds and this is HUD, we would require documentation of that eligibility. So with CDBG, for example, you're going to need to show us that people qualify as low mod income. For ESG, you're going to need to be able to show us that people would qualify for these funds in particular. Things that are ineligible for ESG, there's some repetitiveness from CDBG, political fundraising and political activities and fundraising. But in addition to that, you can't pay for facilities that are not being used for shelter. So if you had you couldn't use ESG funds to fund your office space if you had an office space that was an independent location from a homeless shelter, for example. Housing stabilization costs, or rental assistance that are directly to program recipients, meaning we would not be able to pay an individual who is on the verge of homelessness. Like we wouldn't be able to give individuals a check to cover back rent, for example. You'd have to give those funds to landlords specifically. Stabilization costs that go beyond the time period. So meaning, we were going to help somebody for 3 months, for example, to get them to a place where they were stable in their housing. You could submit for reimbursement for 3 months worth of that work, but not 4. And then a thing that is really important for anybody who's new to ESG or CDBG funds, and I should have mentioned this in CDBG as well, CDBG funds does not require a match. We love to see it, but it's not required. ESG, it is required. So you are required, if you get a $25,000 grant from the city of Lowell through ESG funds, you must have a $25,000 match. So it's a 1-to-1 match for ESG, and that is a required piece of this source. It is not necessarily cash on hand. So we can talk more in a later session with you all about what those in-kind, what some of those matches might be. So for example, cash or in-kind donations. But it is really important that you're thinking about when you're putting your applications together, that you have the ability and capacity to match what you're asking for at a 1-to-1 rate when you're talking about ESG. Who is eligible to receive ESG funds? Shelters, organizations that help victims of domestic violence, groups that, excuse me, do street outreach work, and any providers that are serving homeless individuals or people that are at risk of homelessness. And again, just to give you some like real examples of the funding, this is what we looked at. This is what we received for FY22-23. So just under, 200,000 in 22-23. We again have an administrative component that we set aside. And then for emergency shelters and street outreach combined, the balance, the sort of what's left, only 60% of that can be used for both of those things together. All right, now, here we go. All right, so what's going to change this round? And this is for everybody to sort of be paying attention to, I guess, whether or not you're getting CDBG or ESG. Number one, and this is specifically for CDBG and specifically for folks who, many of you who apply for public service, we are increasing the minimum grant award. For many years, there had been, I think, a little bit of thinking that like everybody should get a little bit. And what that has resulted to in over time is that awards are very small, that we have been asking for quite a lot of backup information from organizations for grant awards that are not very large. And it also means that we're administering a significant number of grants and working with awardees, and it's become unsustainable. And so we are implementing this year a minimum for public service grants through CDBG of $30,000. So what that means in sort of real number examples, if you think about the 319,000 that we got in 22-23, if you just divide that by $30,000, we're looking at a maximum of like 10 grant awards. So again, a minimum amount of $30,000, not a maximum amount of $30,000. But we are moving away from funding $10,000, $15,000 CDBG awards. It's become unsustainable on the administrative side. We want these projects to be significantly more impactful in the community. And we think for the amount of work that you all as organizations need to put into these applications and the amount of work that the backup and the reimbursements and all of that stuff that takes, that it wasn't sustainable, I think, on either end for, a $10,000 grant to be asking you to do as much work as we were asking you to do. So that is a significant change. What that means, just again, to give you some real concrete examples, last year in 22-23, we funded close to, I believe, 19 organizations under public service. So that's almost cutting that number in half. We believe that this is, in the long term, the right way to go. Significantly larger awards will hopefully have a more significant impact on your organizations. It also makes it possible for our staff to work more closely with you throughout the grant process, to work with you, especially if you're a new organization, but to work with you on how to submit the right kind of reimbursements, making sure that you're collecting the kind of information that we need to be able to provide. So please keep that in mind. If you are applying for a public service CDBG application this year, the minimum grant award is going to be $30,000. And we hope that that means that, you know, it will allow you to have some flexibility in thinking about other ways you may fund yourselves. I think we want it, we understand that the larger awards means fewer organizations are going to get funded. And we understand that that might be sort of difficult. What it also means is that it is very likely, we want to encourage you as an organization to consider not thinking about CDBG as being a source that you're going to go to every year. This is going to be a significantly more competitive application process. I think year over year, we're going to see some shifts in who's getting funded and who isn't. And, you know, I think the intention from the feds is that they don't want CDBG to be considered an annual piece of your kind of organization's budget. They do want it to seed programs or to help kind of get things off the ground. And so that's something that you'll all have to kind of think about and be aware of and consider when you're coming into requests for this coming year. So again, just CDBG public service, we're going to implement that minimum $30,000. The other thing that's really important, and this is especially true for organizations that are larger and have a number of programs that you offer, you're going to have to determine what your priority is, because we will only be accepting one application per organization. And instead of the community development team, you know, getting multiple applications and deciding, you know, which one to fund, we want you to decide what your priority is. So we are going to ask organizations to only submit one application. Now, again, earlier when I spoke about whether or not you were an organization that had 501c3, this is why it's really important that you make it very clear if you do not have 501c3 status, if an organization is acting on your behalf as a fiscal agent. So we want to make sure that if somebody is acting on your behalf as a fiscal agent, that's not their application. That's your application. They can still submit a separate application, but that's why it's really important for you to clarify in your application, provide us the documentation about that fiscal agent relationship. And then as far as the RFP process this year, we have gone back and forth on how this is going to work and how we might accept applications. And until we move to a full digital system, which we are inching towards and will likely get to eventually, for right now, we are going to ask all applicants to provide us with a hard copy. So we are not accepting any applications this year via email. You must bring a hard copy to the office. You must bring one full hard copy, which will include attachments, which I'll talk about in just a second, and then an additional copy of just the application itself. So essentially, you'll be bringing one full application and then one partial, just the application itself, and you'll be dropping those off. We will be providing you this year as a part of the application, a sort of cover sheet checklist that's going to say like, yes, here's my 501c3, here's, you know, this documentation, here's my full application, here's the budget. And that cover sheet will have a signature page, which is essentially you assuring us that you are submitting a full and complete application. And that is because this year, we are unable to accept incomplete or late applications. If you come in with an application and then realize like, I forgot this really critical attachment, that is going to be considered an incomplete. And we're not trying to give anybody a hard time, but just in the interest of equity and fairness and the fact that this is going to be a competitive funding process. We really just need consistency, and we need to be transparent about that process, and there's no way around it. So we really need for you to ensure that when you're submitting an application to us, that you are submitting a full application and that you are getting it to us on time. And what on time means. So applications are going to go live next Friday. So Friday, the 16th, the application will be available online. It will be due at noon on the January 27th. Not at 12:01, not at 12:02, at noontime, delivered in person. They will be, each application will be time stamped to confirm receipt. And so again, it's absolutely critical and on you as the grant writers to make sure that you're submitting full applications and that you're getting to the application on time. So I understand we all have a million things to do and you can prioritize your own time however you like, but I would just like to strongly encourage people to make sure you're not waiting until the last minute to finish this application. And then I want to, Sue and Betty and Sandra introduce themselves at the beginning of this presentation here, but here's some direct contact information for the staff. We want to make ourselves available to you. We want to make sure that this process functions for you well. And we know that some changes will result in questions, so you should feel free to reach out to us. I do also want to say there was some confusion about what next Monday's session is going to be. And I want to confirm that it is actually different. Next Monday's session, we're actually going to be going through, we're going to pull up what the new application is going to look like, because it is going to look slightly different this year. And we're going to walk through each section of the application so you can kind of see what it looks like. And we'll talk about sort of what kind of information to include in each section, and we'll review the documents that we'll expect you to submit with your application this year. So I do strongly encourage everybody to also attend next week's meeting to get a sneak peek, I guess, at the application itself. Again, it's going to open on the 16th, be due on the 27th. And then it's also important for everybody to know that this year we are going to be implementing a mandatory Zoom session, essentially, with anybody who does receive grant funding. You will be required as a part of accepting that grant award to attend a session with us where we're going to kind of walk through what happens now. This is how you have to get the grant application to us, paperwork to us. This is what a reimbursement needs to look like. This is when you need to get these things to us. And each organization who gets funded will be required to attend that session before we will execute final grant agreements with you. So we're being a little strict about it, but we're going to hold your money hostage until we know that you you fully understand and are able to satisfy the sort of requirements that we're going to expect from you as a fundee. So I am going to stop sharing my screen now, and I am going to kick it over to the staff, Betty, Sue, Sandra, whoever was going to look at the questions so we can just start running through them.
Yep. There was a question regarding, Ronnie, I just wanted to confirm if your question about the ESG was about the ESG match when you asked if they restricted or unrestricted grant funds. Where is she?
She responded
She
yes.
said yes
Oh, okay. I didn't see it. Sorry.
in the chat.
I apologize. I'm not sure what that means. So I think the match can be anything from in kind to any other funding you receive. Can be
Well,
used
actually,
for your
Sue,
match.
I was referring to any grant money that potentially Project Compass would receive from either one of these. Are those restricted funds? So we assist homeless youth, and we have 2 homes, and we're looking to sort of we're looking to expand the capacity at this point. So if we applied and we qualified for one of these grants, are those dollars restricted? Could we only do that, you know, to increase capacity, or could we do that to assist with, you know, building a new program for our residents?
You can use our funds for anything that's eligible under those programs, as long as
Okay.
it's serving Lowell people, that
Okay,
you'll be able to report Lowell people, and you'll be able
Okay.
to provide us with the necessary backup that we require, depending on how you'd like to use the funding.
okay, so folks in our North Chelmsford home would not qualify for any of those funds, just
No.
Lowell. Okay,
Mhm.
The other
Okay.
thing I will piggyback on that a little bit is that if you apply for something and you get funded for that, there's not like, there is a process to shift focus. So if, and that's not an automatic. And I think I kind of want to flag that for people. We have run into this issue in the past where it's sort of like, we thought one thing when we applied, we identified a different need when the funds came through, and we
Gotcha.
kind of want to change our focus. That is not something that like you as the organization gets to decide without coming to the city first, because that will require an amendment to the agreement. And so
Okay.
that's a process that we may be able to engage with you on, but please don't make that assumption, and certainly don't spend funds that are different than what you initially applied for without there being an adjustment to your grant agreement.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys?
Just to confirm for you, Andy, you asked about the number of applications. So Giovanni, we're correct in saying someone can apply for public service. They can also apply for non-public service.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that when I had mentioned we only want one application. We only want one application per pot, I guess, from organizations. So if you apply for a public service and a non-public service, you can do that. You cannot apply for two non-public service grants.
Anything else?
We got a lot of newcomers. Nobody's got questions.
We
We
must
did
have
pretty
done a
good with
really
that.
good job.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to kind of reiterate, bigger awards. We hope that that means that our awards will have a bigger impact for your organization. It definitely means that our staff will be able to work more closely with a smaller number of funded organizations and sort of help you through this process. We know that HUD funds, we're very grateful and lucky that, you know, we have access to these funds, but federal grants are no joke, and it takes a lot of paperwork, and it's a long process, and we really do understand that, and we think that this shift is going to make it possible for us to help you as much as possible through this process. Again, next Monday, we will be going through the actual application. Literally, we're going to do a screen share. You'll be able to see what the application is. We'll review each section and talk to you about kind of how to fill it out. And what we expect of you as a grantee. This information, we're recording a session. We are going to try to figure out a place where we can upload the video. It's going to be way too big to email to anybody, but we'll figure out a place where we can upload it and send a link out. We'll also be posting this slide presentation on the city's website, so you can refer back to it. And obviously our community development staff is available at any point to kind of talk to folks about this. Just strongly encourage folks to consider doing an application early. It's when I say it's a new application, I will say that we're not, if anything, we're trying to make it easier. So it's not like going to be a longer or more complicated application. We're hoping we can make it as straightforward as possible. So we believe it's not going to take a ton of effort, different than what you're normally putting in, but we do expect people to get them in on time, or I'll be the bearer of bad news for the staff and kind of have to say, no, thanks, we can't take it if you're late. We just really have to draw the line, because we know that we're going to get more requests than we're going to be able to fund. I believe I just saw something pop into a chat.
Yes, it
We've
was
had-
someone asking about if they sent it FedEx or Express Mail, would there be someone here to sign for the packages when they arrived?
Assuming that you send it so that it arrives prior to noon on the 27th.
Yeah, we were saying in the past, we've had stories of, you know, people running across the plaza in the snowstorm on those Fridays at 11:59, and we're watching them as they're racing to get their application here and tripping up the stairs. And that's probably not the best idea this year because it's we're going to be much stricter this year. So there won't be, nothing late is going to be accepted at all. And if it's incomplete, it won't be accepted at all. So please take your time, make sure it's complete, that we have all the attachments we request, and we'll go over that next week. There is a little bit of a different process this year, so.
So we're going to defer to you. We would say, you know, we're going to be very, very strict on accepting it. If you want to, if you're going to get it in way early and feel very comfortable about sending it in the mail, then we'll defer to you on that. We will timestamp it when it arrives to us and be able to confirm receipt. But if you're cutting it close to the end, I think that you need to, make sure that you're hand delivering it to make sure it gets here on time.
Giovanni, someone asked what's the major criteria we're going to use to decide on who's going to be funded. For example, the numbers served. We'll probably go into that a little more detail next week, like what our criteria, the scoring kind of thing or whatever.
Yep. So
Yeah.
typically there is a bit of a scoring criteria, you know, based on the number of people served, you know, what income bracket, like, you know, low mod income, how many people you're targeting, what the activity is. You know,
The
this
impact in
year,
the community.
impact in the community. I think this year we're also going to be looking at, you know, we need to diversify who we're funding. I think we're really eager. I'm so happy to see a lot of new faces on this. Meeting tonight. We're going to be looking at, you know, whether people have been using these funds for a number of years, or is this your first time applying for these funds? So there is a sort of metric, I guess, a matrix when we're reviewing applications, and we'll definitely get into more details about what that actually looks like in the next session. But it'll be very clear in the application, kind of the information that we're really looking for you to provide us to give us the best picture of who you're going to be serving and what impact that's having in the community.
Anything else?
Anything else, folks? This is your miss the beginning total funding pool for the grant. So we don't know the full 100% amount. I will say for CDBG, I don't have it in front of me. It was like 2.1. Was it 2.1 in 22-23?
Yep.
And that was for fiscal year 22 to 23. We generally, and for ESG, it was 180 something.
188, yeah.
So we, generally speaking, when we're releasing these applications, haven't gotten the final 100% to the penny dollar amount from HUD yet. So what we've typically done is take the year before's numbers and look at it about, give or take, about 5%. So we think it will be comparable to 22-23. So again, for CDBG, we had about 2.1 million, and for ESG, we had about 188,000.
Which equaled out to be about 320,000 for public service.
Yeah. Any other questions? We scheduled this until 7:30, but I don't want to hold anybody hostage if we kind of ran through. But I also want to make sure that we're answering anybody's questions. Sue, Betty, and Sandra, can you guys also write your email and number in the chat so people can have that, so we don't have to pull up that slide again, so people can have your contact information.
Will you all, I have a quick question. Will you notify people by email when you receive their applications by mail so we know that you've received them?
We can do that.
Okay.
We also had another question come up. If if someone is a long-term recipient, if they have less of a chance.
It's not necessary, like, I don't want to say that. I don't think that that's totally accurate, but I do think that we do want to encourage. I don't think that I would say that is like 100%. If you've gotten funds previously, you're definitely not going to get them this time. That's not what I want to say. I do think it's really important for organizations to start looking at CDBG as an opportunity to like fill a hole or fund a program you haven't been able to get funded in the past, but it is not going to be a guarantee every year, especially for the public service, the public service pool, because of the change in award amounts. We just won't be able to fund as many projects as we have in the past. So I think organizations need to start thinking about this application a bit differently. Sandra, can you drop your contact information in the chat as well? Sue, Betty, and Sandra have all dropped their email and direct extensions in the chat. If after this meeting something comes up and you have a question about something, please feel free to reach out. Like I said, next Monday, same time via Zoom, we're going to be going through the actual application itself, going through the checklist that you're going to be providing us, and talking through what the specific asks and questions are going to be in that application. And then one more time, just because I feel like you should always repeat yourselves about the important things. The application is going to be due, the application will be available to the public on the 16th. The application will be due on January 27th at 12. One hard copy of the full application with all attachments and one copy of just the application itself and the checklist is what we're going to expect you to submit to us. There is a different meeting link for next week. Let me drop it into the chat right now. It is a different meeting link. It will be a similar thing where you're going to be asked to register. And then once you register, you're going to get the link for, there it is. I just dropped it into the chat. You're going to be asked to register for that meeting. As soon as you register, you'll get the link for the meeting itself. It is in the chat right now, so I'll leave that up for folks. It is also available on the City of Lowell's website. If you just get onto the city's homepage, it should be there, the live link for the meeting on the 12th as well. So I want to thank you all for coming. We appreciate your taking the time to learn more about this process. We hope we'll get some new applications this year and some old folks coming back, and we're just really excited about being able to support this process. Lois, during the workday, no, because it's a little hard to schedule it with this many different organizations and because so many of them operate at different times. I will say that once we do fund people, that mandatory training that we're going to expect everyone who gets funded to attend will likely be during the workday. But the next session we're going to have in the evening. And like I said before, we are going to make the slide deck available online, and we're going to try to figure out a way to upload the video of the recorded meeting and ensure that, we can share that out for anybody who was unable to join us tonight. So unless there's any last minute questions, I want to thank you all for attending tonight. The team was going to try to make themselves available to you if you have any specific questions about your organizations that you'd like to reach out to us about. And we really look forward to seeing you all next week so we can review the actual application for the 23-24 award rounds. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you all. Nice to see
Thank
some
you.
faces.
Can
Have a
Mike
great
stay
night.
on?
Thank
Oh.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks very much. Look forward to it.
Sure.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Bob.
night.
Good night. Well, that was good. I liked that.
That was
Yeah.
smoother than I thought with the chat and everything going on.
Yeah,
Right,
it wasn't
same
bad.
time.
Not many questions, so.
Yeah.
really.
This is weird because we're all here. I'll just run down to your office.
Oh, that's
Okay,
fine.
I saved
thank
the
you.
the
We're
comments.
still recording this too, so I'll.
Okay.